Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 72, recorded on August 14th, 2020. It is the 31st recorded conversation with my friend Mike. So again, we discussed the differences in our worldviews, Mike contending that the solipsistic worldview has value by negating the existence of a, quote, reality outside of one's subjective experience, and I contending that there is good evidence for, quote, reality, independent of one's beliefs and perceptions of it, such that the worldview that contains that external reality is actually more useful. We still have not come to agreement. We also discussed the processes occurring in our discussion, trying to see what interferes with significant progress. We both agreed that the discussion was helping us to think more deeply.
Do you remember what we were talking about last time? I apologize, Bill, because I don't. I've had another crazy
Yeah.
week.
Uh-huh. Yeah, what we're working on is our different worldviews and the worldview of solipsism and uh, how that is different from the worldview as provided in the book on the mind-body problem, subjective model, objective model, and reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the subjective model and objective model are essentially the solipsistic part, and then reality is the other component in my worldview, but in solipsism, reality is not there, if I understand correctly.
And what were we talking about exactly? Do you recall what I remember we ended up with something. Do you remember? I don't recall, unfortunately.
Do you remember sort of what it was in general?
You provided a high-level synopsis, which I agree with, but there was a more of a detailed. I usually remember, and these past 2 weeks have been difficult, and I haven't recalled.
Well, there's a one of the issues has to do with what would be the rationale for the solipsistic viewpoint. And
Okay.
the way that I recall is that it was the essentially the postmodern idea that, well, if there is no actual truth, no objective reality, well, then there's just your opinion and my opinion and everything, and there's no reason to have any discussion about it or to get mad about it. And so one of the main benefits
Right.
is the postmodern benefit
I
of
recall.
avoiding conflict.
Right. So I had recalled. I recalled that part of it. I wouldn't quite describe solipsism exactly that way, but I do think actually that's a benefit, and I think that I wouldn't call that a rationale. I don't particularly. I would not say from a utilitarian point of view, there's a lot of benefit to believing in that things are this way, therefore we should to get these benefits. I don't think that substantiates solipsism. But I do kind of would agree with you that those are some of the natural consequences of the view. And I would think solipsism is just is a view of that encourages humility in a person, an acknowledgement of their own limits, an acknowledgement of other people's limits, and it works against a person's nature to be overconfident in themselves and to see the world as black and white. So that certainly is one of the benefits. But I think the fundamental. Mhm.
But those benefits can be obtained without being solipsistic also.
Certainly. But I think the rationale for it, I guess, for so to speak, is I think from all the things that I've read and different philosophers, is that there is simply not only is there no way of providing evidence for anything outside the phenomenological, but there's not even there's not even a really convincing argument that I think satisfies certain philosophers to the point where they can confidently say, yes, there is, I can know with certainty that there is something outside of I'll use the word, my subjective experience. And I think that's the rationale for that perspective for most philosophers that I've read about it.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of where we left off too. And I would say that there is evidence.
Right, we talked about the model, you being able to be incorrect. I recall now.
Yeah, that's right. In other words, if something seems a particular way to you, then from the solipsistic standpoint, that's what exists. But we know that something can seem to be a particular way only to turn out not to be correct. That we can have perceptions that are not correct, and we can have beliefs that are not correct. Mm-hmm. So there is something external to our subjective experience and subjective model.
Well, I think you have to define what you mean by incorrect a little bit in a bit more detail.
Okay.
If I recall, it was contrary to the prediction you made of an outcome.
Yeah, except that's can mean more than it might sound like it's meaning to begin with. Let's take the example of you're looking out kind of in the distance and you see this lake or something like that, pool, and you comment to this entity beside you, a person, and you say, look at that cool pool, or something like that.
Oh, damn it. Bill, this is my dog's doctor. I have to take this. Give me one moment. I apologize. Hold on a second. Hi, Dr. Hay. Oh, hi, Chris. How are you? Okay, sorry about that. We're good. No problem. So you were saying, you were giving the example.
Right, okay. You were looking at this pool in the distance, and this entity beside you, a person, says, and you said, look at that cool pool. And the person says, oh, didn't you know? No, there's no pool there. That is a mirage. I think that if we are going to consider, if we're going to use the concept of mistake and agree that we can make mistakes, then that's the evidence for something beyond solipsism. What you are experiencing at the moment, you may a moment later say, well, that was a false experience. That was a mistake. Or what you are believing right at the moment. A moment later, you can say, whoa, I was wrong about that. And
The
so uh, the, the whole the whole concept um, of reality is that it is something that is independent of your subjective experience, your beliefs about your subjective experience.
See, that to me
Mhm.
sounds like somebody realizing that they were internally that their subjective expectations
Mhm.
were not what they had expected. Doesn't have anything to do with what's happening kind of out there, so to speak. I think what's happening, I think in what you're saying, there is a hidden assumption. Like I was saying this during last time, there's a hidden assumption that there is some type of ideal that we could be right or wrong about, where I don't think that's been shown. What you've just shown in your example is that somebody's somebody's expectation
Prediction.
or prediction was incorrect.
Mhm.
It doesn't has nothing to do with proving anything out there.
Well, that's what incorrect means. In other words, if you are using the word, it's got to have some meaning.
Well, that's why I mentioned before there's an implicit assumption, I think, there. When you're incorrect from a phenomenological or a solipsist point of view, doesn't mean incorrect against some type of ideal.
What does it mean?
It would mean, I had mentioned this before, and I haven't gotten a lot of sleep. My brain is not firing on all cylinders today, so I might take a little bit longer to explain this. But
Okay.
I mentioned saying it last time. It means that the person's the person's subjective the person's let me use the word subjective experience. It means that the expectation that somebody had based on their subjective experience of reality changed. It has nothing to do with what's going. For example, you could just as easily have said, um, I see a pool, and the person says, kind of, no, you don't. It's a mirage. And they walk up to the pool, and the person is playing with the pool, and inside the person's head, the person thinks they're tripping out on acid. That's another good example. Somebody's tripping out on LSD. They think they're touching the pool, and the pool is just an illusion. Well, let's say, for the sake of argument, and let's step outside the solipsist point of view for a minute, and say the pool is really there. If the pool is really there and the person touching it believes they're hallucinating, then the it kind of shows that what is considered to be right or wrong, real or unreal, is simply something that's happening inside of somebody's head. And an LSD trip is a really good example of that, I think, or somebody that's schizophrenic.
Okay.
Another good example is somebody with an eating disorder, which is, I was watching a documentary on an eating disorder.
Wait.
And,
We're
okay.
getting away. I wanted to mention, you said if the pool is really there.
Right. I said, let's step outside the solipsist point of view and assume that there is some type of reality to the pool. if the
Okay.
person believes, this is what I kept talking about previously, that truth is a localized phenomenon inside of a person. It's not an idealized state. That's a very solipsist phenomenological perspective, which is very, very, I think, and from what I've read, is very, very hard to show otherwise. Very, very hard to show that there is you know, objectively a pool there, because you cannot appeal. The only way that you can convince somebody of that is by going is through a phenomenological mean. You need to talk to them. They need to experience what you're saying phenomenologically in their head and make a decision to believe you or not to believe you. Their decision to believe you or not to believe you has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. So you haven't shown. You've been using a phenomenological. You've been using a sub. I won't use that word phenomenological. You have been using an argument based on subjective experience to try to prove and show an objective reality, and that's just is not convincing enough.
What is the meaning of objective reality?
Something that exists outside of your subjective experience. Nothing exists without your subjective experience. That's a solipsist point of view.
Independent of.
Independent of.
And the solipsist says that there is none.
No, I don't. No, I don't. A solipsist doesn't say that. It says that a solipsist would say you can't know for certain that it's true.
Well, this is a separate issue. When we're talking about the feeling of certainty, then we're talking about the whole issue of probability. In other words, yes, it is true that you could, I would say, that you could take any phenomenon, any experience, and say, well, there is some probability that that is not so. But that's not the same thing as saying that there's nothing independent of your experience of what's going on within your experience. And if there were something beyond that, if there were nothing beyond that, you couldn't refer to your subjective experience because there's no boundary. There's no boundary to it. It's like
well, there might be a boundary, but that boundary is a function of language. Doesn't mean the boundary necessarily exists outside of subjective experience. Language exists inside your subjective experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's correct.
I think this speaks to the one argument that I know of, and I mentioned this before, that it kind of dissolves the solipsists, not the solipsist. And that argument is, yes, you can't know for sure, but from a practical point of view, that really doesn't matter. In order for us to live our lives, we have to make some assumptions. And even though we can't know for sure, in order for us to live and function, interact with people, we have to make some assumptions that these things really do exist. And I forgot, I'm going to look up the philosopher that made that argument, but that is the only argument I've ever heard that really addresses, I don't know, the solipsist dilemma, if you want to call it. They don't attack it head on. They just say, yes, you can't know for sure, but it doesn't really matter. You have to live. And I think that philosopher was very wise because he realized that it's essentially true. We only experience, no matter what we experience, we're experiencing it subjectively. and we cannot know for sure. But, so what? Yes, but that really has no basis on ontology or epistemology or
Yeah,
anything like that. And
but
I would disagree with that, but
but when you use the phrase "know for sure," that is a phrase that
what
uh,
does for sure mean?
makes the assumption that there is a reality, uh, and that one's uh, belief about it or perception of it um, can only be accurate to a probabilistic extent. In other words, that one can always question anything, and even though the odds would be very, very, very low.
Well, here's why it's really, I would argue, um, here's why, and this goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning of the conversation. Here's why a solipsist point of view has some value. Yes, you can absolutely question everything. And that's certainly true of solipsism. Doesn't necessarily mean or imply that it's not accurate or true. I don't think that just because
What is
language, I don't think that's just because language can imply the opposite, doesn't mean it necessitates the existence of the opposite. But more importantly, this speaks to the the practical purpose of solipsism. Most people, okay, don't question things. Most people don't question their beliefs. Most people are, in fact, absurdly confident in what they think, to the point where they're willing to argue, fight, and kill people because they believe they're right, and they believe truth is not localized, that it's absolute. There is an idealized truth.
okay? Wait, because it's unfortunate when there are so many things build up that I want to respond to, and
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
uh,
please.
now I can't remember. Let's see, the last thing you were saying to try to restore. um, what was the last thing you were saying?
Well, I had said a couple of things. I think one of my major points was that simply because language would imply the opposite of something doesn't necessitate that that opposite exists. That was one of my points of solipsism. One of my points. Another point I had made was, and the last point I had made was that solipsism, yes, it is absolutely true that people can believe and question anything. And that in itself doesn't imply that solipsism is untrue. But that's the whole point. The whole point is most people, from a practical utilitarian point of view, almost nobody really questions their belief, questions their perception. They are, in fact,
Oh,
the
oh,
exact opposite.
now
Yeah.
I remember now what it's a fine point to some
Yeah.
extent, but I think it is not an accurate statement that most people don't question any of their beliefs and will fight and kill and so forth. I think that has only to do with certain kinds of beliefs. The people all the time will say, well, I think the store is over there just a block away from Harris Teeter. But I'm not real sure about it. And somebody can say, well, no, it's 3 blocks down.
Yeah, those are
Oh,
pretty innocuous.
right. Yeah.
And
Okay.
if we're talking about, go ahead.
So what I'm saying is that it depends upon what the beliefs are about. Now, I agree that there are some beliefs that that people do quote, hold on to and find it very difficult to question. And that is, where the concept of cognitive dissonance comes in. And it's some of our beliefs are a part of what maintains our self-esteem. And then if we question that, we experience a drop in self-esteem. Oh,
Yeah.
if I'm wrong, that would be terrible.
See,
So yes, there are such beliefs, but we, on the other hand, yes, we question our beliefs all the time, and we
yeah, I,
correct.
I, I,
You see,
I think that is kind of like a straw man argument. I think that you're taking, or straw man fallacy. I think you're taking my argument and simplifying it to the point where you're kind of missing the point.
well,
I think,
I just wanted to.
well, certainly, yeah. I mean, I think that's because people don't believe that's a belief. I think people, if they say something like, "I think the store is around the block," but I'm not sure. Okay, that's not a belief. They know they're not sure. It's not.
But
It's not a belief.
you and I agree that it is a belief, right?
Yes, you and I would agree that it was a belief, but the person themselves, I don't think would. The
And
person saying it, they're overly confident in their position.
no, I understand that people have a reaction to the word belief that is actually contrary to the way they used it, because this person who said, I think it's around the corner, and you asked the person, what, you believe it's around the corner? They would say yes. In other words, they would use the word believe or belief in the way that we use it. The problem is that because of, in our culture, the problems related to religious beliefs, in quotes, people try to avoid that, that they are, quote, against religion and they don't have any beliefs and so forth. But that's not it's a common word that's always any statement that you make, that you believe, you can make that statement preceded by, I believe that. And that's what the word believe means. I
Yeah.
believe that, and then the sentence is what it's a model of what I believe.
I would argue that someone's entire orientation to understanding reality, the world, their own lives themselves, is completely a belief, and only a belief. And every person I've ever met, I'm not even going to say some. This is including myself. Every person I've ever met has an inappropriate level of confidence in their orientation to religion, existential beliefs, ethical beliefs, cultural beliefs, anything you want, other people themselves. They all are a set of beliefs that's completely phenomenologically subjective, not based on any kind of ideal. And people don't really realize that. They think that their orientation to understanding these things is somehow based on kind of absolute ideal. And a solipsist or phenomenological perspective completely blows that up. And that is one of the practical benefits of really believing in and adhering to, as much as you can, a solipsist perspective.
I'm not sure that I agree.
Wow.
I think that
How so?
I think that the solipsist solipsistic point of view does not offer any benefit that is not also provided alternatively. People can indeed believe that there is a reality independent of their beliefs about it and their perceptions of it. And although in some areas, indeed, many people are extremely resistive to any questioning of or change in those beliefs, those specific beliefs.
But I think you're still using a definition of solipsism that reality, quote unquote, does not exist. I think that's not my understanding of solipsism. Okay. Solipsism is it can't be known for certain to exist. It introduces a consistent amount of doubt and self-questioning and humility, I would argue, that I find other orientations to understanding yourself, other people, life, that they don't have. Most other philosophies assume in some capacity that there is something out there that you can either be right or wrong against. And that necessitates, I shouldn't say, that encourages people to have an overconfidence in their own belief systems, I would argue. That's my perspective.
It is not my impression, or I have a different impression as to what causes the excessive degree of confidence with regard to certain beliefs. And it's and we could explore why, but certain beliefs have been acquired within a cultural programming that expects the person to have certain beliefs. And if they don't, then they are being disloyal to the tribe that requires those beliefs as loyalty to the tribe.
See, that in itself, you hit the nail on the head. I think no matter, solipsism is unique in a sense, in that it's the only system of thinking I'm aware of that does not encourage some kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, it's in-group. If you take a real strong solipsist point of view, that everything is relative and there are multiple truths, then they're almost, you could look at it, there is no in-group or out-group. You're in the group of all groups. And whereas other philosophical systems, which you said, cultural or whatnot, if they engender a certain belief system, there now becomes a possibility of somebody to believe differently. I'm right, you're wrong, and there you have the in-group and out-group dynamics again.
But I can imagine exactly the same thing happening with solipsism, that to be a member of this group, we all are solipsists. And,
then you're not being solipsist. I mean, know, I was watching and listening to some college course on Karl Marx, and the professor had said, "Hey, look, you can't blame Karl Marx for the evils of communism any more than you could blame Jesus for the evils of Christianity, of Christians, of what they've done. And I think the same is true with solipsism. You could bastardize solipsism and turn it into I'm right, you're wrong. But the I would argue the definition of solipsism would prevent how it's defined, that you can't know for sure that truth is localized, not absolute. If you truly live according to that life, according to that ideology, then you can't say we're solipsists and you're not. And there's something wrong with that. I mean, I guess you could say we're a solipsist and you're not, but you can't elevate yourself against another group because their viewpoints are just as relevant and accurate as yours. At least that's how I interpret. That's how I apply it.
Yeah, but I think there's some question there. But wanted to get back to the idea. It has to do with, there has been a lot of concern in the philosophical area about the concept of truth and different definitions of truth, and the question as to whether there is absolute truth or not, and whether one can identify anything, any particular belief that absolutely has to be true. Descartes tried to do that with I believe, therefore, I
think, therefore I am.
Think, therefore I am.
Right.
But when we use the issue that we're dealing with, the practical issue, is the problem of difference of opinion, difference in belief, and what happens when there is such. And for many beliefs, there's no particular problem. People recognize that they are mistaken. Somebody will say, no, I don't agree with you, and let me explain why. And the other person says, oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, I agree with you now. But there are certain areas of belief, certain content areas that are highly problematic because, as I said, in general, something bad happens inside, so to speak, if one becomes doubtful about what one formerly believed. What one formerly believed may have had a strong influence on how one feels inside, especially the area of self-esteem, which has to do with how do I regard myself, but that's very much connected to how am I regarded by other people. And so we are very reluctant to question those beliefs that are of that sort. And yet we know that there are differences among people and differences among groups of people with regard to some of those beliefs. And then when two different groups have two different beliefs that really affect, for instance, how others in their group would regard them, then they're very reluctant to to become disloyal to their group.
See,
So,
and right.
so and see, this is one of the ways in which humanianity is manifesting itself. By humanianity, I mean the movement away from authoritarian ethics
Right.
to social contract, rational ethics.
Right.
That and but uh, so consistent with that is that what we should start doing much more of than what we have been doing uh, forever is we should really work on coming to agreement about anything that has to do that has importance regarding our quality of life and so forth.
Yeah.
And
See, yeah, I don't just want to clarify. Um, I don't think solipsism or looking at the world phenomenologically, having that orientation prevents agreement. It doesn't prevent somebody from um, working to tackle climate change.
makes it unnecessary.
No, I no. In fact, I think it makes it more possible. I think if you if you are if you are let me run through, I guess, let me run through climate change from a solipsist point of view.
What you're saying, yeah, okay, you're saying that, well, yeah, people can come to agreement about anything,
No,
and
no, no, no.
as
What I'm
long
saying,
as long as they come to agreement, that's fine. But that's not the
no, that's not what I'm saying.
within humanity. It's coming to agreement to that which is accurate.
Yeah. So from a, if you look at, let's take climate change from a phenomenological, from a solipsist point of view. Okay. I can't know for certain that the climate and the world and anything out there actually exists independent of my subjective experience. All that being said, within my subjective experience, yeah, I'm experiencing these things, I'm seeing these things, I'm making predictions about these things, and these predictions that I'm making are indicating that something bad's going to happen. And also within my subjective experience, I noticed that I can't fix this by myself. I'm going to talk to other people, and I'm going to try to, convince them that climate change is a problem. I can do all of that without knowing for certain that what I'm experiencing actually exists outside my subjective experience. It doesn't prevent you from acting. What it does, it gives you a degree of humility and a sense of your own limitations, such that when you are speaking to somebody else that has a different point of view, you're much less likely to dig your heels in the sand and say, I'm right, you're wrong, this is the way we have to do it, and if you don't do it this way, I'm going to fight you. Whereas the other orientations,
all other orientations,
no, I said, whereas other orientations, I think do encourage that.
all of them.
I don't know every other orientation, but
Well,
that's why I'm hesitant to say all. But I think within humanity, I would say my understanding of humanity would encourage that, and I've seen it encourage. I've seen that play out already when we've had discussions with other people about humanity and religion, and I've seen both groups dig their heels in the sand in order to convince the other person that one is right, in an effort to come to an agreement. So I think humanity would be one of those orientations and orientations to understanding things that would encourage digging your heels in your sand.
Let me comment there, though. Um, I think that this openness to consideration is being accomplished by many people without any awareness of or ideas about, quote, humanianity.
Sure.
Okay, and
yeah, I mean, there are other ideologies besides solipsism where one that encourages people not to dig their heels in the sand. There's,
right,
there's plenty of them.
right. Okay, so solipsism does not have an advantage over
I
these
think
others that encourage humility and not digging heels in the sand.
no, I at least from the way that I interpret these other ideologies, and I have had these other ideologies in the past. I think the orientation, in my opinion, this is my opinion, of course, the orientation that encourages the most humility and the most doubt would be a solipsist point of view. That I think the solipsist would be you can't be sure of anything. In most other orientations, you can be sure of you. In a solipsist point of view, you can't even be sure of your own solipsist orientation. It even casts doubt on your own solipsist orientation.
So within solipsism, there is no right answer.
What do you mean? I would say within solipsism, there is no objective right answer. Correctness is localized inside of each person's head.
Correctness, you mean the feeling of certainty?
No, I would argue that the feeling of certainty is the only thing. The feeling of certainty in a solipsist point of view is analogous to your statement of accuracy. When you feel that when the person feels like something is accurate and accepts that feeling, then that becomes accurate inside of that person's objective experience. That's what's true. Even if that person encounters something that completely contradicts that belief, if they don't change what they decide to believe in to something else, it's still accurate within that person.
But see,
truth is low, and accuracy is localized.
But see, the problem is then that's a different meaning of the word accuracy.
No, I would argue that the way you're using accuracy has an implicit assumption of an idealized condition that you can be right or wrong against. I think that assumption should be, if we're talking this level of technical jargon, that assumption has to be questioned if we're talking this level of technicality philosophically.
But it's inherent in the meaning of the word accuracy. However, wait, please. It is inherent in the meaning of the word accuracy, and that from a solipsistic standpoint, then it is a distortion of the meaning of that word accuracy.
Yeah,
because there's no such thing to compare something like a belief or perception to that would be confirmatory or not.
But you just did it again.
Do a good job.
You're you said there's nothing you can appeal to gauge whether it's accurate or not. I mean, yes, exactly. That's the whole point. The whole
But
point would be that you're implicitly assuming something exists that, if you're talking on the level that we're talking about now and examining things at that level of technicality and detail, you can't assume to exist. The fact that the word you believe the word that, it's inherent in the word accuracy is just an appeal to a dictionary definition of an accuracy. And an appeal to a dictionary is logically fallacious. A dictionary reflects the common use of the word.
that's
When
not
we're
what
talking about this level of technicality, it doesn't reflect the most accurate.
I'm a little worried because see, I hear you say things that I don't agree with, but you're going on, and I don't get a chance to.
Let's do this. Next time that happens, just do this. This way I'll know, because sometimes it's hard for me to interpret the body language. So next time I'm going on and I make a statement that you don't agree with and I build on that statement, just raise your hand and I'll stop.
Okay, I've been raising a finger, but maybe a whole hand.
Oh, I apologize. I was writing what you were saying and I didn't flip back to the screen. I apologize.
No, I
Just raise your finger. I'll see it. I'll make sure I keep on you. A lot of the times I write down what you say, so I follow it. Go ahead. Let me put you
And let me just mention that I think the mind or the brain is such that it is very difficult to do two things at the same time.
I would agree.
And so if I'm saying something and you are writing down what I'm saying, I think that it will be very difficult for you to really consider what I'm saying. It's almost a way of spraying it with concrete or something.
I can understand what you're saying.
I do have a feeling that I say the same things over and over, and we go around in circles.
Well, I feel the same way, and I think that the reason why we do that is because we
are in the sand.
Huh?
Because our heels are dug in the sand.
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's that. Well, maybe our heels is in the sand. I think, again, from a solipsist point of view, we don't have to come to an agreement. Your viewpoint is completely accurate, even though it's to a certain degree opposite mine. It's completely accurate within your localized subjective experience, even though mine is completely accurate within my subjective experience. So I don't necessarily have the need to come to an agreement. Go ahead.
But see, that is a different use of the word accurate. It's just like
what is
what you were just saying, that well, what's accurate in mine is not accurate in yours subjective experience. Let me use a different example that I've used many times. It's this thing about reality. If there is no, see, my understanding of the word reality is that its primary meaning is that which exists independent of one's beliefs about it or perceptions of it, meaning that one can have a belief that is not consistent with reality.
Right.
Okay. Now, the postmodernist comes along and says, oh, well, what is reality for you may not be reality for me. That's a change in the meaning of reality. And it is a change in the meaning to make it equivalent to reality is what I believe at this moment.
Okay. Aren't you doing the same thing? See, this eventually, I believe, is going to come full circle and show how, again, how solipsis is going to get the upper hand here. So aren't you doing the same thing? Or
Well,
other people, not you, I don't want to make this personal. Aren't other people doing the same thing? So a group of people, whoever it is, defining a word according to what they believe. An entire culture came together and decided what the word accuracy means. And words have changed, the words have changed their meaning over time to mean different things.
Wait, back up. Yeah, reality is its basic meaning has been to indicate that people can make a mistake. You think that's real, but it isn't.
And I have a couple of arguments against that. Firstly, I think you're making an appeal to the masses, which is logically fallacious. I think you can't say just because a whole group of people define something in a certain way or believe something means it's accurate. That's the first thing. But
Well,
moreover,
please stop right there. We're talking about a word and how people use it. So, like the dictionary just reports, well, most people mean by the word reality such and such. And that I'm saying is the original meaning of the idea of reality. It is saying that there is such a thing as unreal, that that even though you believe something is real, it is not. That there is that people have agreed upon that.
people have agreed that the earth is flat for thousands of years.
That is the meaning of the word.
I don't agree with the whole basis of your argument.
It is referring to the fact that people can be mistaken. That's what the word reality is for. What do you think?
No, but
Okay.
I think that you are.
Will you present what you think reality?
I would present what I think. The word reality is a agreement that a group of people made about what it means, and I would agree with you that they. I think it's possible that they made that they adopted that definition for convenience to make their lives easier to to live.
Because it works.
Right, it has utility. Sure. Doesn't mean it's accurate. It has utility.
Oh, wait a minute. We're talking about the word accurate and so on. See, we're going around in little and big circles.
But I think that you are. Well, I'm going to say what I'm doing. That I don't see this conversation that we have as examining, the way things, the way people are currently behaving, and the way people are using words. I see the point of these conversations to try to undermine a solipsist point of view, and this is a good thing. I mean, I think it's to challenge a solipsist point of view, to challenge a phenomenological point of view, and substantiate others. And I think that simply appealing to how people use words is irrelevant. I mean, it'd be like arguing, you know, people believe for thousands of years the world was flat. Well, okay, now they believe it's not.
So when they
Some
believed it,
people believe it's not.
so when they believed it was flat, they were making a mistake. In reality,
Well,
the
I'm going to say something even more crazy. Let's use a current flat earther. My argument is that the fact that the earth is round has
fact,
no, the fact, right, the fact that the earth is round, right, because that's language. I'm using language right now. The fact that I'm using language doesn't make it real. I have to use language
what
because
does the
there's
word what does the word
limitations here.
what does the word fact mean?
The fact that there's an objective reality outside of your subjective experience that something exists.
Okay, that's a fact.
Right. That's what I'm defining a fact as. So the
Okay,
fact that the earth is round,
that's solipsistic then.
that is not solipsistic. So the fact that the earth is round and not flat is, and people would argue against that, and that's something that, let's say, I believe or somebody else would believe, does not make that fact true, does not make that fact accurate for a flat earther. For the flat earther,
But see,
the world is flat
but
until he believes otherwise.
that there is was a sudden shift in the meaning of the word fact.
It's not a me. Let's take a step back and see how we're using language here. If we are going to examine these problems and these ideologies with a degree of, I don't know, technicality, I think we have got to either invent new words or we have to use words a little bit more flexibly, because the words in the dictionary do not provide enough detail or resolution, so to speak, with the degree we're talking about.
Right. Okay. So for the purposes of our discussion, we can use the word reality in a particular way. Well, what happens, or fact, the word fact, what happened was I saw you using it in a particular way, non-solipsistic.
Right. And that's exactly that's right.
Sentence. I was in the middle of my sentence.
Go ahead.
So that's happening some here, that I don't get a chance to be clear about something. So
I'll be on the guard for it. Go ahead.
That you were using the word fact in a non-solipsistic way, using its pretty much its usual meaning. And then when you went into the solipsistic viewpoint, you changed the meaning of the word fact.
I would argue I didn't change the meaning of the word, but
Yes.
let me ask you, why is that a problem?
Well, it's a problem when we use words in different ways, use it one way for a while and then suddenly switch and use it another way to have a different meaning. It's
okay. Well, I don't think I was a different meaning.
I think so.
I went against no. I've been saying all along basically that there's no such thing as facts. And then I used the word fact. But I have said many times before, and I think even during this conversation, that that supporting what that philosopher, which I forgot his name, had said, which is basically that, you know, to live in this world and to interact with people and other things that are really just in your subjective experience, that we have to use language and have to make assumptions that we can't be sure about. I might, you know, just because I believe the world is round if I'm going to, and I say that to a flat earther, that I believe the world is round and I believe it's a fact, it doesn't prevent me from saying at this level we're talking about, at this degree of technicality, that to say something like, well, if I really think about it, and I'm speaking really, really technically, what's really happening is that within my subjective experience, I believe the world is round. I don't really know if it's round. There's nothing that prevents me from doing that. I'm not changing the word fact.
I'm sorry, I could not follow. There's something that is going wrong in our dialogue. Um, I guess, see, I believe that the solipsistic viewpoint has no value, no reason for its maintenance. You believe that it does have value. Mm-hmm. We somehow cannot come to agreement about that. And from the solipsistic standpoint, if I'm hearing you correctly, well, agreement is not important, and that's one of the values of solipsism. And I would say agreement is extremely important, but also that the ability to question even that which one has been in agreement about, to subsequently question it, and to be able to change or to update and upgrade one's beliefs and so forth, is a very important thing also. But this thing that is going on between you and me, our dialogue, I think there is something wrong. It's going wrong somewhere that is resulting in our not being able to come to agreement. So you are shaking your head.
Why do you think something needs to go wrong for us to fail to come to an agreement? I guess what I'm hearing is that there seems to be an implication.
I did not say that.
Oh, I thought you said something is going wrong in our communication such that we can't come to agreement.
Despite our really talking in depth, it's like so each of us is saying the same thing over and over and over again.
So why is that indicative? Why is that indicative of some kind of failure in a communication? The implication seems to be that if we don't agree, there must be something wrong. So I guess the implication is we should be in agreement. So I don't understand that orientation.
Yeah, that's. I think that this is a fairly basic fundamental difference between you and me. To oversimplify it and say I am strongly in favor of working toward agreement, and you are not in favor. You don't believe that that's important. That seems to be a difference between the two of us.
I would agree. That's a fundamental difference. Yeah. Correct. Yes.
And I would say, I have said elsewhere that if we humans could not agree on anything, we would die. Agreement is extremely important. However, not just agreement, but that agreement must also be to that which is accurate or that which is optimal if we're talking about ethical beliefs as opposed to existential beliefs. Our existential beliefs should be as accurate as possible, because when the existential beliefs are inaccurate, we make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, we increase the odds of pain, suffering, disability, and early death. Go ahead.
You had said, my understanding is if we as humans cannot agree on anything, we will die. And I would agree with that. But you seem to be using that to substantiate the belief that we must come to agreement on everything. That's not necessarily true.
That's not what I said.
No, but that seems to be what I'm hearing you say is that it's important for us to come to an agreement, because if we as humans cannot agree on anything, we will die. So therefore, it's important for us to try to come to agreement on everything.
No, I never said that.
No, but that's what I'm hearing. So yeah, that's not your belief system.
Correct. That's not.
Okay, so then why is it so important that we come to agreement on this?
On the discussion between you and me?
Yeah.
For one, I think that we are providing an example to other people of what should take place if there is disagreement about something that is important to the quality of our lives. Now, maybe there is disagreement between us as to whether what we're talking about is important to the quality of our lives. But I would say that it is highly important that that we humans, if we have different beliefs about things where that difference in belief is such that it makes a difference with regard to quality of life, that if there is such difference, then we humans should work on coming to agreement, because the work on coming to agreement fosters the increase in the accuracy of existential beliefs and the optimization of ethical beliefs.
But isn't that what we're doing now? I mean, we're working towards coming to agreement. I mean, that's the fact. It doesn't, what I heard you say, it's that we don't have to agree. We always have to keep working towards coming to agreement.
Yes.
We examine our own belief systems.
Yes.
Yeah, and when you...
Wait a minute, wait.
Oh, okay.
Say, we don't have to agree. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Meaning that the goal of this conversation is not for me to convince you to agree with me. It's not for you to convince me to agree with you. It is, in fact, to establish a forum where we're trying to come to an agreement for the benefit of us questioning our beliefs that we have ourselves. And that's what I really get. When you disagree with me, I question my beliefs and I refine them. And as a matter of fact, I know you're going to find it pretty crazy, but the start of this entire thing with me and the start of me pursuing phenomenology and solipsism was the discussions we had on your Mind Body book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the start of me exploring a whole nother realm of philosophy that I'd never touched before.
Mm-hmm.
I found it very, very convincing, and it's changed my life in many, many ways, and it's helped me in my relationship with my wife and my parents, and to put my own death in context. It's been have remarkable benefits. But whenever we talk about it, I refine it and I question it, and I change in response to the inaccuracies you're pointing out to me. So, I don't feel I need to convince you, and I feel that what you originally said is truly of benefit. We're being a role model for people, that two people can believe in two different things and stick to it and keep talking with each other, even though they disagree, because we're examining our own beliefs. I think it's a good role model, I think.
Yeah, and we also are examining ourselves and how we function in the situation of having difference in beliefs and so
Right.
on.
Hey, one of the things, absolutely, that's another thing I think about. I have struggled my entire life with what I would call, an excessive level of passion and my emotions. I get very, very passionate about things, and these forums are an opportunity for me to practice reining that in and getting under control. And during the beginning of these conversations, I think if we go back a year or two, granted, I was only getting a couple hours of sleep. I would be getting much more frustrated. I would be getting annoyed. I would be raising my voice. And I would end our conversations feeling ashamed of myself and saying, I can't believe I behaved that way. And I've been working on that, every time we talk, where sometimes I slip up, but I think for the most part, I've gotten better. And I feel more in control of myself, which is a control of it's a good thing, for me. So I do think that, we're still being a good role model for people, even though we're not coming to agreement.
Yeah. Um, so the question still remains in my mind as to why we are not coming to agreement. And
I know. I know what it is.
go
Because
ahead.
solipsism is true. That's my conclusion. But I have no evidence for that. I can't provide any evidence. But at least it's an argument that supports it.
Well, the problem with that is the word true. Again, and
Right.
so we go
It's using
around
it
the
in
circle. Yeah.
dual ways. I'm using it in a dual way.
So
And that's something I think that's important. I think that you again, solipsism I don't think prevents people from making an assumption and forgetting about solipsistic views during their lives. For example, I don't walk around holding my dog or speaking to my daughter kind of questioning about whether she really exists. I mean, that's not, I think, that's not how solipsism is beneficial, at least in my life. Solipsism is a branch of philosophy that rears its head when we start talking about things at this level of technicality. But I would say 80 to 85% of the time, maybe 75 to 80% of the time, it's not on my mind. It's not on my mind about when I go to the grocery store about, is the grocery store really exist? Is it around the corner? I'm not thinking that. I'm assuming it exists. It's like that philosopher said, that you have no other choice. You have to assume things exist. There's no other way of living.
yeah, and well, I was going to say, and the word exist. I think I was going to say something that I think is not accurate. So
Could we explore why it seems to be very important that we do come to agreement, that these seems to be, I'm concerned that you're not getting anything out of these discussions because for you, the goal is for us to come to agreement.
well, Okay, that's an important issue, I think. Uh, the goal is to come to agreement. The reason for having that goal is to achieve the goal of more accurate and optimal beliefs on my part, um, and hopefully on your part also, and
Would agree.
hopefully on the part of anybody who is able to uh, listen to us at any length. Um, so, see, with regard to goal, I am Humanian, and so I use the Humanian ultimate ethical principle, and that is that we should do uh, that which, well, um, the goal is to have as much joy, contentment, and appreciation as possible, and as little pain, suffering, disability, and early death as possible for everyone now and in the future. So, therefore, if that's the goal, then I should do that which will promote not only the survival of our species, but also as much joy, contentment, and appreciation as possible, and as little pain, suffering, disability, and early death as possible for everyone now and in the future. So that's my ultimate ethical proposition. Okay, so um, it uh, to me, it seems to follow from that
Mhm.
that I need to behave in rational consistency with that ultimate ethical principle. Uh, Rational meaning the rules of consistent with the rules of logic and the rules of evidence. Um, and so, how then am I going to accomplish that? Well, I think that one of the most important ways is the sharing and comparing of beliefs with the goal of coming to agreement, because if person A believes X and person B believes not X, then that is a contradiction. It's against a rule of logic. And so, therefore, uh, it would be, uh, it would increase the probability that the belief being arrived at was the best one if agreement came about.
Mhm.
It increases the probability, but it does not assure the assure that that is what has happened, because people could come to an agreement and arrive at something incorrect.
Okay.
But it's just increasing the probability of coming to increasing the probability of having accurate existential beliefs
Right.
and having optimal ethical beliefs.
Right. Yeah. See, this is a huge fundamental difference in our orientations.
What's
Um,
yours?
um, for this, I could say pretty much is something that is operating within me when I catch myself. That I think, like any human, I have a natural tendency to try to dominate, um, and that manifests itself by me trying to convince somebody they're wrong and I'm right. Now, all that being said, I think a real different orientation.
And by the way, that's built into us as
Right.
hominids. Mhm.
I absolutely agree.
Struggling for dominance.
Struggling
Yeah.
for dominance, and it's something that yeah, you always have to keep an eye on because it's just the way we are. So yeah, but there's a fundamental orientation that I think is very, very different. Where with when you just describe the benefit of in terms of getting more accurate existential beliefs. You know, that's an area where my solipsism, I think, is a little bit more pronounced, where I'm really not that sure of what that existential beliefs are, like I said before, that there is an idealized set of existential beliefs that we can either be more accurate or less accurate against, especially in the realm and the domain that we're talking about. Now, if you talk about physics, science, something like that, from a utilitarian point of view, it's extremely difficult to not recognize the utility that there is some idealized way of describing space. And if we want to go to the moon, that, there's some ideal. Go ahead.
Okay. I want to be clearer then about what I mean by accuracy, because you're thinking in terms of, oh yeah, it's good to have accurate beliefs to get to and from the moon and so on.
Right.
I'm saying that everything that we do is based upon a prediction as to what will happen if we do it, no matter how small or large. And when our beliefs are accurate, then what we predict will happen happens, and there's no problem. I'm talking about, for instance, if you are walking, every time you put your foot down on the ground, you have a belief that the ground is solid and your foot's not going to go through the ground. We know that occasionally a person could indeed make a mistake along those lines and step into quicksand. So that his belief was not accurate. So we're talking about not just complex scientific ideas about space and time and all of that. We're talking about, if you say hi to somebody, you're predicting that it will have a particular effect. And then you can be surprised if it doesn't. If the person turns around and says, "What did you say to me?" or something like that, then, uh-oh, something has gone wrong. What I predicted was not accurate. I predicted that he would hear me say hi and would attribute good intention to my behavior and so forth. It's about anything. You put a spoonful of food in your mouth, and there's the prediction as to what's going to happen when it gets in there.
Okay.
And all of a sudden you can find, and it can be a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea that one can make a mistake, that one's belief can be inaccurate, is applicable to everything we do. And that the more that we have inaccurate beliefs, the more we make mistakes. Now, sometimes we can make a mistake and it can actually be beneficial, but the odds are that it will not be beneficial. It will be different than what we had anticipated. And if we anticipated what we wanted to happen, then chances are something else happening would be something we didn't want to happen.
Right. I think I think our discussions are moving into the realm of epistemology. How do we know what we know? And I think that you are making an assertion about how we know what we know that is based on the outcomes of predictions you make and the accuracy of our beliefs.
Say it again, please. I'm making
That
an assertion.
you're making an assertion
Uh-huh.
that the way we know what we know is based on the outcome of predictions that we make about the world. And I think
not exactly.
Oh, okay.
How we know is we make observations as to what happens when we do stuff. Most of the time, in most of what we do, everything is going along smoothly. And so what we are predicting is going to happen is what actually happens. Well, there was another part to this, but it's gotten away from me. I can't get back to it.
Yeah, I know how that feels. That's why I write things down, because I don't remember anything either.
Yeah.
So I think that I have a little bit of a different epistemological position. Although let me say, I do agree with that. That how we know what we know is that we make observations when we do stuff. And we know what we know based on the outcome of predictions we might make, whether they're accurate or inaccurate, would encourage us to change our beliefs. I think that what I think is a difference between our two positions is that I maintain that the observations, the predictions, the outcomes of those predictions are entirely contained exclusively within your own subjective experience. And I think that your orientation says, no. Not all of it is in your subjective experience. Only your reaction to it is within your subjective experience. There's actually something out there that you're being, no?
Well, I think in the Mind-Body Problem book, I define the subjective model first as, subjective experience. I talk about subjective experience as all that you ever know. It's all that you ever have to work with, and so on. And then, so you have your subjective experience and your beliefs about it, and so on. And then, so that's your subjective model. And then there's this phenomenon within that where certain entities say, no, you're wrong. The truth is such and such. And then another says, no, he's wrong. It's actually so-and-so. But what happens is you begin to develop beliefs within this subjective thing that you're talking about, beliefs about something that exists independent of your beliefs about it, because you have found that you learn all sorts of things from other people that you could not have arrived at from just your own subjective experience, minus being told by these other people. A good example is just education, so what happens is that this objective model, which is the effort on the part of people to arrive at the most accurate set of beliefs, means that we construct these models of, quote, reality that cannot be imagined, because we and that gets into that metaphor that I used. Let me try the two people looking at a lamp or something. looking at an object, and over the head of each one is a cloud that indicates what's in that person's mind. So there are three lamps. There's the one that's the real lamp, and then there's that that's in. Okay, and
Right.
those lamps that are in the cloud over the head, or the balloon over the head of those individuals, cannot be the same as the lamp itself, because however you look at it, they're just models of the lamp, uh,
Right.
because light has struck the lamp and converted into neural impulses, and then gets into, well, how does that produce consciousness and everything? And uh, okay, go ahead.
Okay. You said two things, but I want to touch on something you just said since it's hot. See, you said there are two people looking at the house. Because there's actually three people in that picture. There's the two people looking at the house, and then there's the third person, you, looking at the two people looking at the house. And I think that is something that provides the illusion that there is actually a house. If you
Well,
remove that third person from that picture, it's just these two people.
no, what's happening, that's the problem using any metaphor or analogy. That's changing it. As soon as you, it that is portraying something that was not meant to be portrayed by the analogy of the picture, or the metaphor of the picture. Uh,
Yes, but
but that
you're making conclusions based on that, don't you think?
I there are conclusions, yes, but if you extend the metaphor to include yourself looking at it, that changes the metaphor completely. It
Well,
makes
this
it
is, yeah.
so all the only reason for that metaphor is to say that a person's perception of the lamp
Oh, okay.
has to be different than the lamp itself.
Yeah. See, I think in that picture, implicitly, in order for you to even make the analogy, you have to make the assumption that two people are seeing a house that has an idealized reality, that this is the way the house really is. And these two people have pictures of it in their heads. And I don't think that's the way things work in reality, so to speak. That is something that is an artificially, it's a result of a metaphor and the way that metaphor works. But that's not how, for example, if you and I are looking at a house, I have no idea what's in your head. I'm just seeing a picture of a house in my head. That metaphor is makes an assumption that I don't think is true or accurate with respect to how we experience things. And I think that mistake is also made, um, you know, when it comes to time and our understanding of time. You know, in
Okay.
order for you to think about the past and the present and the future, you have to be looking at things from a different point of view than you always see them. You always see things
That,
in one present moment.
yeah, but that's going off into a very,
Yeah, it's
very
going to tangent, big tangent. We're not going to
uh,
have time for it.
take out time. No
Yeah,
time.
to take out time. Let's definitely take out time. That's too crazy complicated. But you see what I mean about that picture though? That picture, in order for that analogy to work, you're making an assumption. The picture has to make an assumption about the house actually existing,
Uh-huh.
which is where I'm saying this is another example of an assumption that
Yeah,
is not necessarily true.
but there is one reason for believing that it is true, and that is our ability to predict, our ability to make mistakes, our ability to be able to do something. If we were totally unable to predict anything at all, there would be no reason to make the assumption that there was such a thing as reality.
Okay. Yeah. And I would say, again, if we're talking at this level of detail and this level of technicality, that what's happening there is that, well, let me put it this way. The mistake, the sense of you've made a mistake, is happening inside of somebody's subjective experience. And the possibility, the strong possibility, I would argue the only possibility maybe, that exists to explain that is that your subjective experience predicted the wrong outcome.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to, or it, let me say, I don't want to use that word wrong. Your subjective experience predicted an outcome that you did not expect.
Correct.
Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something.
Wait, say it again, please.
Your subjective experience, excuse me, exact opposite. Your subjective experience predicted a, this is even better. Your subjective experience predicted a subjective experience that did not happen. That could be explained by making a mistake with regards to reality. But it could be also explained on the basis that the original subjective experience that you had with regards to whatever you thought may have been out there was just simply different than what it predicted. I mean, it's not like when let me make it, this is difficult to explain. So let me do as an example. If I turn around and expect that I go downstairs and I see my wife because she's home, I go downstairs and see she's not home, that both those things happen within my subjective experience. All that means is that there's a dissonance between what my subjective experience predicted and what I'm experiencing now. It's still all happening within this bubble.
Yeah, but there's something
To
more
do with what's happening out there.
There's something more that can be said, and that is the experience you had, experience number one,
Mm-hmm.
where you believed that your wife was downstairs, was actually incorrect.
I would argue the subjective experience were internally inconsistent. It wasn't incorrect. It was internally inconsistent. It was inconsistent. It predicted something and it didn't come out to be true.
Yes.
I don't want to use the word true. I have to use that word again. It was a different outcome than what was expected. That creates dissonance, and we make the assumption then, well, the woman must not have been there.
Yeah.
Do you follow me? But it's still happening inside that bubble.
Well, I understand that it's happening inside the bubble, but what we're saying is that what's happening inside the bubble can be used as evidence to indicate that there's something outside of the bubble.
It can be used as evidence. I don't think a solipsist would say it can't be used as evidence. Again, when I go downstairs and my wife's not there, I'm not questioning about whether my wife really existed. But I think what solipsist point of view does encourage is when you think about things very technically, all it says is that you cannot be sure of your belief. You cannot be certain anything exists out there other than what's in your own subjective experience. It doesn't mean you can't make assumptions. It doesn't mean you can't lie to yourself. It doesn't mean you can't pretend. It doesn't mean you can't believe that there is something out there. It doesn't even mean that you can believe some things are out there, other things aren't. It just means that you cannot be sure. You cannot be certain that things are known to exist. Certain that known to exist.
There was a point there. Um, I'm telling you something about my subjective experience, where you were saying something slowly, and when you said it, I thought that did not sound right, and immediately at that point, your speech speeded up, and you started saying a lot of other things. And see, then
I think it's because I recognized it wasn't right. So I corrected myself because I wasn't even looking at you. I was going like this and thinking and trying to form my thoughts. So
well,
I wasn't aware that you didn't. What didn't you agree with? I wonder if it's the same thing I didn't.
oh, well, it got washed away from, I mean,
Well,
it got,
let me say it again. Let's see if we can pick it up again.
okay.
If I am taking a solipsist point of view, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to live according to that point of view at every moment of every day. It means that you can, when I go downstairs, for example, and my wife is not there, I don't question whether my wife really exists or not. That's not something that I'm doing. I'm not questioning whether things exist if I go to the store. It doesn't prevent you from believing some things exist, other things don't. It doesn't prevent you from believing, nothing exists, but pretending that it does. It doesn't prevent you from believing, everything exists. It's all it says is that you can't be certain. You can't know for certain that things exist outside your head. It doesn't prevent you from doing anything else.
Outside your head, there are problems with that. But leaving
Yes,
it aside,
leave that aside.
um,
Outside your subjective experience is what I mean by
no,
outside your head.
yeah, I understand that. It's I wonder. I don't feel certain about this, but I wonder if we could say that that there are different worldviews that are not consistent with each other, contradictory to each other, but can be maintained, and that it is not possible to say to make a quote factual statement or an objective statement that one of those is correct and the other is not, but that there is very likely to be a difference in value of the worldviews. Like, for instance, that one might be able to do more with one worldview than another, or one might feel better with one worldview as opposed to another.
I wish I would have written down everything you just said. I'm happy we recorded it
Yeah, yeah,
because I think you're getting real close to hitting the nail on the head.
yeah, and this is actually related to something, moving away completely from what we've been talking about solipsism and or the mind body problem book worldview. I am presented with situations in which the problem of people's worldviews being different produces problems. And see, I am non-theistic. I do not believe that I'm being watched or that there's an entity that is making things happen because the entity wants them to happen and they wouldn't happen otherwise. But I have pleased the entity or something like that, offered the right prayer or whatever. Um, so, and I'm a member of an atheistic organization. And my observation is that the organization, to a great extent, behaves exactly the way that organizations that
I know what you're going to say. Yep.
opposes behave.
Yeah.
Uh, in other words, it's an example of tribalism and so forth. But um, then, sort of setting that aside for the moment, I was planning a Skype with somebody who is very much Christian, somewhat fundamentalist.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Actually, I've had a conversation with such an individual, and it went fine. Uh, but the question is, well, I can't quite put it all together, except I feel out of place in my atheistic organization, and because I have no need to make fun of
Yeah.
and put down the those who believe other things and so forth. And what and the people who are there have escaped, so to speak, or deserted uh, their um, their church organizations, and uh, uh, my suggestion would be, well, why not stay there and just not make a big deal of it, but let people know that when appropriate, that, well, I don't believe that there is a God, and then, you know, handle the discussions, because the some religious organizations very much support that,
Yeah.
and of course others do not. And but it would I have this impression of that atheists uh, are banding together, are coming together and slinking around.
Mhm.
The word that comes to my mind, hiding, kind of in hiding. And they talk about, that they had to come out
Yeah.
to their family and so forth, and that could produce major problems and so on.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that if the atheist uh, modeled the approach that, well, I understand you have a different worldview, and I'm not against you because you do, and it'd be interesting to see if we arrive at different ethical beliefs by virtue of having these different um, existential beliefs and so on. But I don't have a well organized set of ideas about this. This is kind of just where I'm at right now.
I
That has
yeah.
to do with this issue of worldview. So
Mhm.
coming back to us, um, so I have the worldview that includes that there is a reality, and you have a worldview that says that there is no reality, except that you don't use that approach all the time. It's just certain times.
Well, I would think that,
No,
no,
we
I
don't.
would say it a little bit differently. I would say that there is a localized reality inside of everybody's head.
Yeah, but that's a different
Different
meaning.
use of the word reality. Right.
No.
Yeah. So I think the way that we would normally refer to reality, that something out there actually exists independent of our subjective experience, that is not true. I would say that in the final analysis, if you speak very technically and with high resolution, like we're doing now, with respect to the domain of epistemology or ontology, what's really happening is that reality is an illusion and an assumption that's created inside our own subjective experience.
Yeah, but that is a different meaning of the word reality than the meaning that is um, that is generally being used.
Well, I think you could, I don't have any problem contradicting the dictionary definition of a word or how things are normally used, but I would say that it is similar in the sense that what I'm saying is that the reality that you are assuming is out there, that most people assume is out there outside of their subjective experience, is really inside their subjective experience. So there is a little bit of a connection. The feeling that things are out there, that there is something out there, is an illusion. Everything is really in your subjective experience. So I guess I think it is beneficial to use the word reality to communicate that similarity. That the reality that we think is out there is the same reality that you think it is, but it's really just all inside your head.
But I see that as a contradiction in the use of the term right within one sentence.
Yeah, I don't have, like we said before, I have, if we're talking this level of specificity, of detail and resolution with respect to ontology and epistemology, the nature of existence and how we know what we know, I have no problem changing or contradicting the way words are typically used, because most people do not give these subject areas a kind of detailed consideration that we're giving it now. I mean, it's only philosophers would do that.
Um, yes, I understand that for a particular discussion, um, a word may be specifically defined. But I also believe that it does not make sense to take a common word that means a particular thing to just about everybody and to change it to mean something that would make everybody's statements incorrect when they use it.
Well, I
So
don't think it makes. I don't think it makes. I don't think it makes everything incorrect. I can still say, this phone is real, and the solipsist would say the solipsist and the empiricist, which is the opposite of solipsism, the empiricist and the solipsist would both not are both experiencing the phone the same exact way.
the problem is when you said this phone and you showed it, um, that did not really clarify what you meant by this phone because it would depend upon your
Right.
orientation.
Your orientation. And that's where I was going with that. So both the empiricist and the solipsist experience this phone the same way. So we can both say it's real. But now if you talk a bit more detail with the empiricist and the solipsist with respect to what that means, real, what does real mean?
Right.
You're going to get two different ideas behind
Right.
that.
Right.
But the reason why I advocate the use of using the word reality, because both the empiricist and the solipsist experience the phone the same way. That's why I advocate using the word reality.
Yeah, but there's also the possibility of an hallucination. And
There is actually indeed. I don't think that's a viewpoint that the solipsists would acknowledge. I don't think it would be a probability that the solipsist would acknowledge. I think it would be something that the solipsist would say it's a possibility. Maybe. I can't be sure. That this just exists. The feeling that the solipsist would say, the feeling that the empiricist gets that this is real is just happening inside of your head. It's not reflective of anything that is outside of your head. And the empiricist would
your head and everything.
Outside your subjective experience. The solipsist would say the phone, Mr. Empiricist, the phone that you're experiencing is you're just experiencing that inside your head. And the empiricist would say to the solipsist, this reality that you're seeing that you think is inside your head, that's nonsense. The reason why it's in your head is because it actually exists outside your subjective experience. I used the word inside your head again, didn't I?
Yeah, but
damn it. You know what I mean. I forgot I shouldn't use that word.
Yeah, but I was going to respond. It almost seems like, well, I don't know. Right now, vaguely, it seems like there's a change in meaning that's occurring, but that may not be correct.
Well, no, I think it is. I have to run pretty soon. I should have gone at 8, but let's go to 8:15. I think you are sensing something. I think that you're sensing that the change in meaning between the empiricist and the solipsist with respect to existence outside of someone's subjective experience. And I think that's true. But the similarity, what both the empiricist and the solipsist can come to agreement on is that they are both experiencing the phone the same way. That would be my argument. They'd both experience they would both say the phone is real. The feeling that the phone that the empiricist gets and the feeling that the phone that the solipsist gets is the same. So they both use the word reality. But when you talk about what reality means beyond just an experience, the empiricist would say something different than the solipsist. And that's where that difference comes in, I think.
In the Mind-Body Problem book, I talk about how reality means something different in the subjective model and the objective model. In the subjective model, you're driving along and you have a belief about what's around the corner, and you drive around and there it is. And you say, well, that's what really exists, and you're referring to whether you're experiencing it or not. That's in the subjective model. In the objective model, there's your perception of something, and then there's this what's behind the curtain, so to speak, that we never have access to, other than a report on how accurate the predictions are that would be produced by the suggested model of what's behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. The model is not the same thing as what's behind the curtain. There's never any, it's never like this model is the same thing as what's behind the curtain. This model just allows you to predict what will happen if you do certain things.
Right. And I remember. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. There was a delay.
The more that you are able to predict accurately, the better the model is. That's
right. Yeah, and I remember raising this point when we were reading the book together. I had said that, well, yes, but the objective model, and this would be my argument now, the objective model occurs within your subjective experience.
Yeah.
Everything occurs within your subjective experience.
Yes, and it says that in the book.
Right, which is, and for me and other solipsists or phenomenologists, that's really critical.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fact that everything exists within your subjective experience.
Well,
Means,
that's where there's the difference.
yeah. It basically means it's impossible to use anything other than your subjective experience to prove the objective reality of something.
Well, that's
And
correct, but it's the ability to predict that makes the difference.
right, I remember. I know. That's something perhaps we should continue to talk about next time.
Mm-hmm.
That sound good?
Yeah, I am impressed with how we do not make progress. Like, it seems like we're saying the same things over.
So you just cut out.
Yeah, so going back when we lost connection, what were you saying just now?
I think you were saying, I had said, okay, so, I talked about what we talk about next week.
Mm-hmm.
And you would hesitate. I said, I'll see you next week. And you hesitated and you said, I'm impressed with our inability to come to agreement on things. So I got the impression that you're questioning the value of us continuing to have these discussions.
Well, no, not really. But what worries me is if we just are saying the same things over and over again, what is going wrong there, you see? But no, I think, we can continue. I know that you were planning to have to end the conversation maybe 5 minutes ago, and then we ran into this problem.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think if we're saying the same things to each other,
uh-huh.
I think all that means is that what we're saying is not convincing the other person. That I think, what you're, what I hear you saying, the idea that you're saying is not enough to convince me on the accuracy of your views, and vice versa. And, the same with me, for you. And, I think that's something I'm okay with.
Well, but I guess I have the wishful belief that given enough discussion, there can be agreement. So this is somewhat disconfirmatory of that. So that's something to.
Well, it's interesting.
But then,
Yeah.
But then my belief is, that people should continue it however long it takes. Well, we've got, we'll live for a few more years at least.
At least.
And so
yes,
on.
God willing, knock on wood.
Right.
So I think that, that there's unless you or I understand our own viewpoint more thoroughly, we will not be able to present any new information to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might be the reason why we're saying the same things over again. However, the act of us talking to each other at least forces me to refine my views further. So it increases the chances that I will discover a new piece of information to tell you. But I would agree with you. I think as of now, the understanding we have of our views has already been expressed, and we don't understand our views at any greater level to present any new information on
Yeah.
these topics.
So let's give it some more thought. We can continue it in the next discussion,
Okay.
and see,
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of humanity topics we can discuss
mhm,
that are outside of this domain.
mhm.
So if it get to the point where you don't find this fruitful, this particular topic, I hope that you would be willing to explore other topics and
Oh, yeah,
perhaps, yeah. Okay, good,
sure,
good,
sure.
good. And we still have to read The Mind Body Problem again, because
Yeah.
I would like that recorded.
Uh-huh.
That'd be very powerful for people. And me, I would like to have would like to have a recording of that with the author, to be able to have the author, clarify what's meant in the book.
Yeah, now that is available under podcasts.
Uh, yeah, but not just the reading. I mean, us reading it together like we did.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
Well,
So
the problem there is, as far as us doing that in a recording like this, is that there are long periods of silence.
yeah,
And so that's not something that is suitable for one of these Humanianity conversations.
yeah, and maybe it's a separate series,
Yeah,
because if you recall, one person would share the screen, and we'd highlight a portion so the
yeah,
viewer can read along with us and engage in the conversation if they wanted to.
yeah, yeah. But I don't think that the absence of speech.
Would be good.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that's something we can do, maybe, in addition to these.
uh-huh,
I hope to have another opportunity to meet twice a week, hopefully within the next month or two.
uh-huh.
So, but we'll see how life goes. The problem I'm having with my babysitter now, I have no idea what's going to happen with that.
Well,
So, but in any case, so I'll speak to you same time, same place on Zoom.
yes,
All right. Thanks, Bill. I'll speak to you next week.
yeah.
Have a
Take care.
good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You